Hi everyone, Deacon Ed McCormick here, and I want to wish you all a happy Easter. I'm standing here in the beautiful grounds of St. John the Baptist, and this is going to be the first in a series of Easter videos on the meaning and significance of Jesus' resurrection. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking out from the church and a parishioner approached me, and he asked me about a line in the gospel where one of the disciples said, I don't know what he means by resurrection from the dead. And the parishioner said to me, what, the disciples didn't believe in life after death? And I said to him, well, that's not really what resurrection means. And he looked a little puzzled. I think many Catholics equate the resurrection of Jesus with life after death. Jesus has been raised, and therefore, when we die, we too will live with him. And that's true. That's certainly true, but it minimizes the meaning and impact of the resurrection. In a sense, it reduces the significance of the resurrection to this moment after we die. So I want to kind of broaden, expand our understanding and appreciation of the radical significance of the resurrection by making a few comments on a gospel we heard 2 weeks ago. And this is the scene where Jesus appears in the upper room, the doors are locked, the disciples are terrified, and he appears to them bodily. And he's present. He says to them, "Peace be with you," twice. He breathes on them and sends them out to forgive sins. Now, what's going on in this story is the realization of three crucial Jewish hopes that we have to get our hands on if we're going to understand the meaning of the resurrection. Here's the first hope. You know, for 500 years before Jesus, the people of Israel were constantly under threat by some pagan empire, whether it be the Persian or Babylonian, the Assyrian, or the Roman Empire. And perhaps the worst of these attacks was the Babylonian attack, where they came, surrounded the city of Jerusalem, destroyed the capital, destroyed the temple, and deported many of the Jews from Israel. And this horrific experience filled the great prophets of Israel, like Isaiah, with this insight that one day God will bring about an age of peace. One day God will bring about an end to war, but not just an end to war. God will bring about an age where God's peace dominates everything, where God's shalom means that the weapons of war will be turned into implements for farming. It's an age where peoples will be reconciled and relationships restored, and God's new covenant will be given to the people of Israel. And that leads me to my second Jewish hope that we need to grasp to understand the resurrection. At the time of the Babylonian exile, when the Babylonians came and destroyed the capital, the great prophets of Israel, like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah, were convinced that Israel had broken the covenant. And there emerged within Israel, as spoken by the great prophets, especially Ezekiel and Jeremiah, a hope for a new covenant, a hope that God would forgive the nation and restore the people of God and their relationship with God, that God would take out their stony hearts and give them a new one and pour God's Spirit into them. There'd be a restoration of God's people. And here's the third hope, and you hear it particularly in Isaiah 65. Isaiah hopes that one day God will raise all the dead and God will create a new heaven and a new earth where God reigns as king and where God's justice and peace dominate all of creation. Now, if you take those three hopes, the hope for an age of peace, the hope for new hearts and a restoration of God's people, and the hope for a new creation, and you look at Jesus appearing in the upper room, saying peace, breathing on them, what you're recognizing and what you're discovering is that the resurrection of Jesus is the beginning of the fulfillment of these deep Jewish hopes. With Jesus' resurrection, with the announcement of Shalom, he is saying the age of peace has begun to dawn, and I am the one through whom the age of peace is coming. When he breathes on his disciples, he's giving them new hearts and new minds. He is announcing and enacting the beginning of the restoration and renewal of God's people. And thirdly, if you have biblically attuned ears, you'll remember that the last time that there was a breathing on, this happened in Genesis, when God breathes on mud person and Adam comes alive. So by Jesus breathing the Holy Spirit into the disciples, he's beginning the recreation of everything, the renewal of all things. This, my friends, is what resurrection is about. It's what we announce and proclaim and celebrate. That with the resurrection of Jesus, God has begun the age of peace, the renewal of all hearts and minds and all peoples, the restoration and healing of relationships. And he has begun the beginning of God's new creation. I hope this has helped to broaden and enrich your understanding of the resurrection.